Hello everyone, welcome back to another Vlogmas video. We are in front of my TBR bookshelf because I did just film a video for my second channel, my bookish channel. That is linked down below. If you don't see a video on this channel as we are doing Vlogmas, head over to my second channel because there should be a video over there as long as I'm able to upload every day. So far, so good. Knock on wood. I'm working really hard at succeeding at Vlogmas this year, at least so far. So I just wanted to get this video filmed while I'm standing here, makeup done, and I don't have any kids bothering me. So let's just spit it out and get this over with, if you will. I had written down on my list chatting about my most used palettes, and then I was thinking, do I want that to be of all time? Like, what are the top 10 palettes that are have the most usage tracked on them in my whole collection? Do I want that to be the palettes I used the most just in 2022 so far? And I decided to do both. So I decided to pick my top 5 most used palettes ever and my top 5 most used palettes of 2022. I have 2 honorable mentions in each category, so it's kind of like 7 because there was a lot of crossover, more than I actually thought there would be, because I kind of felt like I didn't show my really old palettes, which are usually my most used, but not completely. I feel like I haven't shown a lot of my older palette collection too much love in the past year, definitely using them here and there, but I was surprised that there was as much crossover as there was. So I'm going to start with my most used palettes of 2022. We will rank those. Again, it's kind of like a 7, there's 7 spots in each of these categories so that I had more palettes to share, and then I will share with you the top 7 most used palettes in my entire eyeshadow palette collection, and we'll be able to see what they look like. There is autofocus on this camera, my phone that I'm using upstairs. So sorry you're not getting my good quality big camera, but I wasn't dragging it upstairs. Anyways, I'm saying I need to hurry while also rambling a lot. So in the 7th spot for my most used palette in 2022 with 14 uses, I have my Alter Ego Artemis palette. I got a lot of use out of this late summer and then into the fall. I really enjoyed using this palette, and not intentionally at all, but if you follow me on Instagram, you would have seen that Alter Ego sent me a very kind and generous PR package this week, which just blew my mind, honestly. There's a lot in there. I'm a little overwhelmed, but also extremely grateful. And they actually gave me a 10% off affiliated discount code, which I believe is emilynmax, but I will put that on the screen, and the referral link or whatever is down below if you do want to make a purchase from Alter Ego and you use my code to save some money, and I get a small percentage of that. I thank you so much for using my code. But the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette has been on my wish list for a long time, but I'm so happy I got this palette from Alter Ego, and I used it 14 times. I then have my BH Cosmetics Take Me Back to Brazil palette, which I used 17 times in 2022. This is a great basic beginner rainbow palette. Is it the most wonderful quality? No, I can build it up. It's blendable. I can make it work. And I just find myself reaching in here mostly for projects like pan those eyeshadows or roulette things, but it's also just useful in my collection. If I'm using a certain palette and wishing it had a certain type of more bright shade, whether it be a matte or a shimmer, I can almost always find it in this palette, and I reached for this palette 17 times this year. Next is one of my focus palettes for 2022, so I'm not surprised to see it in this ranking. This is the Wet n Wild Comfort Zone palette, and I used this 18 times. This is one of 2 of my absolute oldest palettes in my entire collection. I bought this and Walking on Eggshells at the same time. I think I say that every time I show this palette. I did hit a pan in this palette this year and got quite a lot of use out of this more bronzy shade. I don't love this palette, and I feel like I could declutter this, but it's also, I don't know, it's just so classic and nostalgic. At 19 uses, I was quite surprised with this one. I didn't feel like, without looking at my numbers, just thinking about the palettes I reached for a lot, this didn't even come to mind. This is the ColourPop Wild Nothing palette. I reached for this 19 times. Again, this was in Pan Those Eyeshadows with this shade here, so it makes sense now that I see the numbers, but just reflecting on my makeup this year, I really do enjoy this palette, but it didn't seem like a top palette that I was reaching for, but here we are. This is a wonderful, very light spring palette. This is soft, ethereal makeup. I know a critique of this palette is it doesn't work for all skin tones, and I completely understand that critique. But for someone with fair skin like me, this is a very good, soft palette for me. I'm not going to get any intense or dark looks with this, but when I want soft, ethereal spring makeup, this palette is perfect for me personally. At 22 uses in 2022, I have my ABH Modern Renaissance palette. I now have 4 pans showing in this palette, which feels really good. Again, I thought I reached for this more than 22 times, but I reached for this palette a lot. You'll get the total usage here in a second because, spoiler alert, this is one of my most used palettes in my entire collection. I would love to continue to hit more pans in this palette in 2023 as well, but I'm happy I'm still reaching for this older palette in my collection on a pretty consistent basis. In the second place spot for most used palettes in 2022, I have my Wet n Wild Walking on Eggshells trio. Again, this and the Comfort Zone are my oldest palettes. They were my focus for Pan Those Eyeshadows for this year when I was doing that project. I successfully hit pan in 2 shades, these 2 shades here. And I think this could be a contender to actually finish someday. The quality in this and Comfort Zone is still the same, despite being so old and so cheap. I think this was $3 or $4. There's nothing wrong with these, so why would I get rid of them? The brow bone shade is the perfect brow bone or subtle inner corner highlight. The eyelid shade I love on the inner corner, but also on the lid sometimes. I don't fully love the crease shade. It's like a bronze kind of color or like a shimmery brown. I personally wouldn't use that in the crease, but it's still a fine quality eyeshadow. And I reached for this 28 times. And lastly, the most used palette for the year is my ABH Jackie Aina palette. I was quite surprised by this, but I used it a lot more than anything else. 40 uses on this guy this year. That happens every single time. I never remember that I leave the brush in here. Oh, I reached for this, 40 times this year. That's a lot. I still haven't hit pan on Trust Issues, which is in my deck of panning project. I'm hearing Emmett. I'm really happy with the usage I've gotten on this palette this year, but really kind of bummed that there's no pan in here yet. Hopefully I can hit pan in this guy soon. So those are my top 7 most used palettes of 2022. Now let's chat about the top 7 most used palettes in my entire collection. Now this is based on tracked usage. I started tracking 2 or 3 years ago, I believe. So it might not be 100% accurate, and there's a lot of crossover, which again, I was surprised about, which I've already chatted to you about. So we're going to try and get through this pretty fast now that we have a sick Emmett here helping. We got to get through this a little speedy. At 70 uses, again, tracked usage, I have my Sephora Pro Warm palette. I really enjoy this palette. It was handed down to me from a friend. It's really big and heavy, but the quality in here is amazing. I wish Sephora collection would be cruelty free because I don't even think they have these pro palettes anymore. They might. I don't look for them because they're not cruelty free, but the quality in here is really amazing. Again, most of that usage came from rolling these shades into Pan Those Eyeshadows, but as you can see, there are no pans in here because these eyeshadow pans are huge and very pigmented. At 75 uses, I again have my BH Cosmetics Take Me Back to Brazil palette. Again, this got rolled into Pan Those Eyeshadows very often, so it makes sense to me that it has a lot of usage in my collection. Sorry, we're going so fast, but especially with the repeat palettes, I've already said all I need to say. At 77 uses, I have the Walking on Eggshells trio. I would really like to get this to 100 uses. It has been featured in my project 100 uses before, so I will hope to get there hopefully in 2023. What's that, only 23 more uses? Wow, 23 uses in 2023 to get to 100? I think I can do that. I have used my Winky Lux Kitten palette 89 times, which is a ton, and most of those uses was to hit pan in that matte cream shade. It took me so long. I don't fully love this palette, but it is fun to reach for every now and then. But this is a case of like such high usage being shown with specifically trying to hit pan in one shade, not necessarily representing my love for the palette. Speaking of, I was tempted to film, which I still might. Chic Geek did ranking her 15 oldest palettes, but ranking them based on enjoyment. Let me know if you want me to do that video because that could be fun as well. In the top 3, we have Pure Cosmetics, the Buff Collection. Again, this is because of Pan Those Eyeshadows, not necessarily representative of my love for this palette. This is a dupe of the Urban Decay Naked 3. I now need to hold this very strange because I have to open and hold things with one hand. It is a very beautiful, soft, kind of pinky neutral palette. My second most used palette in my collection is my ABH Modern Renaissance at 103 uses. And then my most used palette in my collection at 113 uses is my Urban Decay Gwen Stefani palette. Again, this is one of my very oldest palettes, so it makes sense that it's here. A great cool tone neutral palette. Hey guys, please excuse the outro. I'm so sorry. Emmett waking up from his nap, and then I had to get Wyatt from the bus, and then my phone died, which I was filming on, and now the house is just very loud and chaotic with the boys home from school. I apologize for how rushed the latter half of this video was. I don't have time, to be honest, to refilm it during all this Vlogmas craziness. So I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless and at least saw my most used palettes in my collection. You'll have to let me know in the comments down below your most used palette for the year and then the most used palette in your collection. And give this video a thumbs up if you did enjoy it, even though it was rushed. Again, I'm so sorry. Now you're plugged into the wall with very sketchy lighting. So I just need to go and let my phone charge. Happy Vlogmas. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.